Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a lot to go over. We had an exciting weekend of sports, including the Stanley Cup Finals being set. We're going to go over both Game 6s that saw the Oilers advance to the Stanley Cup Finals after beating the Stars, and the Panthers advance after beating the New York Rangers. So we will break down both of those Game 6s, and we will break down the Stanley Cup matchup. The first game of the Stanley Cup starts in just a few days. We are also going to talk about the historic, record-breaking contract signed by Justin Jefferson and the Minnesota Vikings. We'll talk about the implications of that around the league. I know we've been talking a lot about the wide receiver market, and this is something that really does affect the outlook of a lot of different wide receivers. So we'll talk about that actually in our first segment, and then we're going to close out our show talking a little bit about Caitlin Clark. There was a cheap shot foul. We'll talk about really the league's how the WNBA has embraced Caitlin Clark and what might have to be done about that. So stick around for all of that. But before we get into Justin Jefferson, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all you would like me to talk about, go ahead and drop that in the comments. I will get to that as soon as I possibly can. But I do appreciate all of you guys for sticking around and talking some sports with me on a beautiful Monday afternoon. But like I was saying, we've got a lot to cover, and nothing more important in the world of sports today than Justin Jefferson, the star wide receiver of the Minnesota Vikings, maybe the best receiver in the NFL today. In my opinion, he's the best receiver in the NFL today, and he gets paid like it. He gets a brand new 4-year, $140 million extension. $110 million of that is fully guaranteed, putting his money at $35 million a year. 27 and a half of that he's guaranteed every single year. That makes him the highest paid receiver. That makes him the highest paid non-quarterback ever in the history of the NFL. He is now the highest paid non-quarterback, and he absolutely deserves this. I have yet to see a bad thing being said about this contract, and we were talking about contracts for Amon-Ra St. Brown being put at like $22 million. That was the highest paid. This is now $35 million. He blew the wide receiver market out of the water, and he deserves it. My question is less along the lines of, is this worth it for the Vikings? Because it is. Now the Vikings have him, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, all locked up through at least the 2026 season. So they have a great core of weapons to help develop whatever quarterback situation they decide to go with, whether that be J.J. McCarthy, whether that be Sam Darnold, whether that be somebody else they pick up in the future, in next year's draft, or in free agency or something. They have the weapons to draw in a top-tier quarterback. We talked a lot about how a team like the Dallas Cowboys haven't really committed to Dak Prescott, and maybe these weapons can lure him up to Minnesota. That's a completely different conversation, and we will save that conversation for when we have less to talk about in the off season. But just something to throw out there, something that's absolutely a possibility. Justin Jefferson is a guy that can probably draw just about any quarterback to Minnesota on his own, not to mention the rest of those weapons along with him. The Vikings, in theory, have a window, and this is kind of where they've been sitting for a long time, right at that point where, hey, maybe maybe they're contenders. They just need a quarterback, and then they find a quarterback, and Kirk Cousins just doesn't quite push you over the edge, and they just seem to be in this limbo for a team. But it's not like Broncos limbo where they're bad. It's Vikings limbo where they're just constantly good, okay at worst, and it's really interesting how the Minnesota Vikings just seem to continue to win all the time, even though they don't have a quarterback. But that's again, that's besides the point. Justin Jefferson, well worth the money. And bringing this back to a little bit of a broader conversation about the wide receiver market. How does this affect guys like CeeDee Lamb? How does this affect guys like Jamar Chase down in Cincinnati? How does this affect these other top receivers, these guys that you can argue are the top receivers in the game, that being CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson? Those three pretty clearly, most likely, you can throw Tyreek Hill in there, but he's not up for discuss. He's not up for a contract right now. Those three guys, they're all top three, top five guys in the league, and they are all looking or have just recently gotten extended, right? They're all at that point where they're looking for more money. Are the Cowboys, are the Bengals willing to dish out more than $35 million a year for a guy like, for a top receiver? And I think if they do pay CeeDee Lamb that much, if they do pay Jamar Chase that much, it's not going to be viewed as a bad decision, right? Because those guys, both of them, are game changers. Both of them. You saw the Jamar Chase effect when he came in just a few years ago, his rookie year. He immediately made a Bengals offense go from lethargic to one of the most explosive offenses in the league. And, some of that has to do with improvements along the entire team, but the offensive explosion has a lot to do with him and Joe Burrow being there together. Now, CeeDee Lamb and Dallas, the season he just had, he went off. He had an insane season. Are these teams going to be willing to pony up the cash to pay and exceed this contract? That is the question, because we talked about this a little bit last week, I believe, when we were talking about the potential of the wide receiver market exploding. There's always that shot that the wide receiver market goes berserk, and it kind of is. The cap number is sitting around 250 million. So to make the math easy, the cap's going to change every year, but you're paying Justin Jefferson $35 million, which is just under 20% of the cap, right? 50 million would be 20%. It's not exactly 250, but to make the math simple, we're going to just say it's 250 here, right? He's making a huge percentage of your cap. You don't have a quarterback to pay, but with teams like Dallas and Cincinnati, they both have quarterbacks that they are paying. Joe Burrow is the highest paid quarterback in the league right now, and Dak Prescott, we just talked about him. He's heading into a season where we're unsure if they're even going to bring him in. They're talking up Trey Lance right now. They haven't really committed to anything with Dak Prescott in the future. It's going to be a really interesting discussion and negotiations for these receivers. And where does it put guys like T. Higgins? Because T. Higgins isn't going to beat this contract, but he can absolutely make the argument to beat a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown. They're not going to give him $35 million, but can you see him get 30? Where does this put the rest of the top receivers? Because I'm not sure if a team immediately goes resetting the market when Justin Jefferson has just done this. I could be very wrong, but I feel like this was a huge jump. It's over $10 million more than the next receiver, and it's kind of crazy. I love the move. I love the move for the Vikings. He is the focal point of that offense. You saw it even with Mullins in there at quarterback last season. Nick Mullins, he was putting up absurd stat lines. They weren't really winning games, but he was putting up stat lines of 30 for 50 for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, and most of that was Justin Jefferson creating space, getting those crazy catches. Eff it, Justin Jefferson is down there. We're gonna throw it. Just toss it up to him. He'll make that catch. So he absolutely deserves this extension. It's something that the Vikings needed to get done. There were obviously conversations or rumors of conversations about the Vikings trading Justin Jefferson, which would have been absolutely a mistake. You can't trade a guy like Justin Jefferson, hitting his prime, already doing, he's averaging 1,600 yards a season, which is insane numbers. He's at the top of almost of like yardage per games list all time. He's doing stuff we've never seen before on a football field. So he deserves to get paid this money, and I'm excited to see what the rest of these top receivers get paid. If I had to go ahead right now, day of, quick reaction, quick gut reaction. I don't think CeeDee Lamb gets. I don't think CeeDee Lamb or Jamar Chase gets paid more. They might get paid. They're both going to get over 30, but I don't think they're going to get more. Just quick gut reaction if it gets done this offseason. Now, next offseason, that might change because, again, the cap is going to go up. This deal, it happens with every deal. Massive contracts start to look better and better as time goes on because the cap continues to rise. But if we're going off the assumption that these deals for Chase and CeeDee Lamb get done this offseason, I don't think they beat Justin Jefferson. We'll have to see what happens. There's still a lot of time left in the offseason. It's only June 3rd. So we will keep an eye on all of this as the NFL season continues to tick closer. I believe we're on like 90 days until the first game, so it's going to be here sooner than we think. So I'm very excited. The NFL never sleeps, and that's one of the beauties of it. But anyway, in our next segment, we are going to move into the world of hockey. We're going to break down both Game 6s. So we're going to start off with the Oilers taking down the Stars in a really intriguing game. One that is kind of shocking to me that it played out, quite honestly. And then we're going to talk about the Panthers advancing to the Cup Finals on Friday night, I believe is what it was. Maybe it was Saturday. I don't remember. We'll talk about that game, and then in segment 4, we'll do a Cup final prediction before talking a little bit about the WNBA to close out our show. So stick around for that. We will be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.